Each week on the Sky Sports England World Cup ladder, we are ranking the players trying to get into Gareth Southgate's squad for Qatar. But we're going to do things slightly differently this week because I'm delighted to be joined by Jamie Carragher. And Jamie's going to tackle some of the big talking points around the squad at the moment. So, Jamie, let's start in an area of the pitch where England were pretty strong a couple of weeks ago. Right wing back, right centre back. How big a blow has Reece James and Kyle Walker injuries been for England?
Massive, because they weren't just players who were going to be in the squad. I think they'd have been in the team. I think if England would have stuck with the back three, I think Kyle Walker would have been the right-sided centre-back, and I think Reece James would be in the right wing-back. You know, Rowley plays for Chelsea, and so it's not just losing them as in we've got numbers there, they're in the squad, they're in a bunch of players who can play those positions. I think they were starting for England. That's why it makes a bigger blow for Gareth Southgate.
They've both come out and said they're still fighting, they're still hoping to be there. You've played in tournaments where players have raced to try and be fit, try and shake off injuries in time. It's not an ideal situation though, is it?
No, it's not ideal because my recollection of squads I was involved in, players who went into the tournament injured, and there was the idea of getting them fit throughout the tournament, training with them, was probably Wayne Rooney and David Beckham. And two players who I think 99% of us would have done exactly the same as the managers at the time and trying to, integrate them into the squad because they were so important. One was the captain, one was the best player. And it never worked for them, and it never worked for England in those tournaments with injured players. So, I mean, I'd be very reluctant to take too many people in that situation. There's always someone you can take a chance on. The squad's now 26 as well. Which means you can maybe take a couple of wild cards in terms of maybe someone not being fully fit. But certainly with two in the same position, I think it'd be difficult to take the two of them if they're not 100% fit.
Yeah, I guess people like Ben White come into the mix, Joe Gomez even maybe, who's got back into that Liverpool team. Kieran Trippier is probably favourite to start right wing back now, I would have thought. But Trent Alexander-Arnold, obviously been loads of noise about his form and whether he can get into Southgate's starting 11 during the course of this tournament, perhaps can get into the squad. What do you make of his situation at the moment?
Well, this situation is helped by the injuries to Kyle Walker and Reece James. And I think if those two players are out, he's obviously a safe to go in the squad. I still think he'll find it really difficult to get into the team. I think Kieran Trippier would be ahead of him in Gareth Southgate's eyes. I think if you take one of Kyle Walker or Reece James, I think there's still enough room for Trent to go. But I think if those two players miraculously made themselves fit, or Gareth Southgate wanted to take a chance or a risk with the fitness, it may be difficult for Trent in terms of actually making the squad. I don't see him making the team if Trippier stays fit. So I think it all hinges on how Gareth sees those injuries.
Certainly one player he's committed to is Harry Maguire. Rafa Varane looked like he picked up a nasty injury over the weekend. May give Maguire minutes going into this tournament. Is it enough time, though, do you think, for him to build up that form and confidence that got him into the team of the tournament at the Euros last summer?
I'm not sure it is to be at his best, but beggars can't be choosers. I think in that area of the pitch, Harry Maguire has been the standout centre-back for Gareth Southgate in tournaments. He's the one who you'd say, OK, he's the number one, and then others have filled in around him, and there's different names popped up at different times to make squads. But I think he's now the situation he finds himself in. I think he's more in the pack, if you like. So he's in there with another 7 or 8 centre-backs. Okay. I think he goes. I don't think that's up for too much discussion. It's just whether he plays now, because I don't think he's seen as the dominant centre-back as he was before. You're right about how well he played at the Euros. I still think if he's anywhere near to close to 100% fitness-wise, whether his form is completely back to him being at his best. And we probably haven't seen that for a while. Maybe the Euros was the last time we saw that in an England shirt. But that's important. I mean, a lot of the time we talk about players who are in form. But if you're the England manager, form for you, a lot of the time is what they did in an England shirt. And yes, Harry Maguire's last few performances in an England shirt haven't been great. But in terms of what he's done in a tournament, I think if he can get back to being actually 100% fit, I don't like to debate about the squad, but I still think Gareth will plumb for him and pick him in the team.
Yeah. A feature of that Euros and the previous World Cup was England's midfield protecting that defence, but perhaps not dealing with the ball as well as we might like them to do, using possession as well as they could do. Does Jude Bellingham change that perspective in midfield?
Yes, I think he's a different type of player. He takes you back more to a Steven Gerrard type of player. He's going to go forward, maybe try and supplement the attack in terms of, creating chances and scoring goals. So he's a different type of midfield. I think what he makes you think about is Liverpool is England playing 4-3-3 a lot more than 3 at the back. Because when England play 3 at the back, they play 2 sitting midfield players really, and I don't think that's his game, if you like. So it's almost Declan Rice on one other, and it feels to me like Jude Bellingham's at that stage where he has to play. Seeing his performances in those last few internationals in the Nations League, I think deserve that. And he's more of an attacking midfield player than a sitting midfield player. So could he still play central midfield? Of course he could. And if you're playing that back three, Declan Rice can sit in there, he can go forward, and you've still got the back three defenders plus Declan Rice. So there's 4 players going to be behind the ball, maybe one of the wing backs as well. But I think in an ideal world, how he plays for Borussia Dortmund is in a 4-3-3, and he's one of those attacking number 8s, if you like, and that's him at his best.
Yeah. Pretty clear up top, Harry Kane's going to start, but his backup is quite up for debate at the moment. The other week you were backing Ivan Toney, partly because of his penalty record, partly because he's a good player. Do you still stand by that, even when we see Callum Wilson coming back and scoring, Dominic Calvert-Lewin coming back and scoring as well?
I don't think you could take Callum Wilson and Calvert-Lewin. I think they're almost a similar type of player, and similar as in they pick up injuries. So they would be a risk to take because you're not that confident that they'd see out the tournament as well. So if you're going to take one, you take one of them, if you like. I think Ivan Toney is similar to Harry Kane in a lot of ways and a little bit different to Calvert-Lewin and Wilson. I think Ivan Toney is actually a lot better with his back to goal. He actually comes short. He's got a great awareness of what's around him. When the ball's coming into a little layoffs, little touches around the corner. He's a really clever footballer. He hasn't quite got Harry Kane's passing ability, but we see that a lot from Harry Kane. When the ball comes into him, he's very aware of what's around him, laying the ball off, clever cue passes. And Ivan Toney's got that as well. I would take Ivan Toney for that ability to hold the ball up, bring people into play, and also for penalties. I mean, England have got a much better record under Gareth Southgate on penalty shootouts, but him, I think you don't think he's going to miss. And I think it would be one or the other in terms of, Calvert-Lewin or Callum Wilson. And then Rashford has to come into the equation, the way he's performing this season and the fact he can play, right across the front.
Yeah,
and Tammy Abraham as well.
Yeah, there's a few contenders, aren't there? Rashford is one who's gone up and down this ladder over the last few weeks. His form sort of fluctuating as he looks really good in one game and then off it a little bit. He's missed quite a few chances recently. He's not maybe got the goals that his performances warrant. But where do you think he is at the moment in terms of his progression? Obviously back fit again and getting regular minutes for Man United, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he gets goals. I don't think he's ever going to be massively prolific in his career. But that blistering pace, the fact he can play, as I've said, across the front line, and he's got a lot of England caps. He's played in tournaments. He's been there before. Some of the players we're talking about have maybe not got his experience of tournament football and getting up those caps and appearances for England. So I think he may have just done enough as well. And I keep saying yeah to almost everyone. I feel like my squad's about 30 or 40 players. But I just think the fact that it's 26 now, those extra 3 players, I think makes it a lot easier for the manager.
Gives you some room. Within that then, Jamie, are there any players perhaps on the fringes of the last few international squads that you'd like to see involved in Qatar?
I think the 2 that stand out are probably Maddison and Ben White. I think Maddison, just for the form he's shown in a really struggling team, and the fact that players are of his ilk, even like a Foden or a Grealish, they're a certainty to go. But they still haven't lit it up yet for England in an England shirt. Now, I'm not saying Maddison should replace those players in the squad, but we're still waiting for those type of players to do something out the ordinary, a little bit special in an England shirt. And he's one who's doing it in the Premier League, again, not in an England shirt, but I think he's definitely one. And Ben White, the form he's shown in the Arsenal team this season, and the fact we've got problems at right back, and he also gives you the option of playing right-sided centre-back. I think if we play 3 at the back, I think Ben White's more of a right-sided centre-back than a wing-back, really. He's a centre-back playing right-back. But he's got forward of late, he's created goals as well, and he's a really cool, calm customer, which I think is more suited to international football as well.
There's obviously some decisions for Southgate to decide on before he names that final 26, but just generally, when you look at this squad and his options, how do you rate their chances in Qatar then?
I think England to get through the group. Well, of course they should do at the calibre of opposition, but it's just how it falls in terms of the knockout stage, and that is what's gone for us in the last 2 tournaments, which has helped us get to a semi-final and a final. And again, I'm not trying to knock the squad or the manager. I think they've done fantastically well, but you just hope again it falls that way, because if it doesn't, I think if we come up against Argentina, Brazil, France, you know, the real top 4 or 5 teams, where England are just outside that, I'd say. I think they'd find it difficult, but I think there's a chance that they could play France not too far into the tournament, and that may be a problem. But France have got their own problems as well, you know, losing lots of games of late, lots of question marks around that squad as well. So let's see.
Yeah, you never know in those knockouts.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So 14th of November is the date that Gareth Southgate's got circled in his diary. That's when he has to name his 26-man squad for the World Cup. And we'll keep debating on the England World Cup squad ladder each week about who's going to make the cut.